Welcome to the podcast, How You Build It, a story for financial advisors and fund managers and the real stories behind their businesses. I'm Vincent Hayes, and on the show today with me is Tim Slatter from Slatter Communications. Now, Tim is someone with a clear mission. I met Tim a few months ago, and immediately I knew I need to know this guy a little bit better. As an ex-youth pastor, he transitioned and became a fractional head of strategic digital communications for financial advisors. Tim, it's great to have you on the program and to be able to spend with you, I don't know, maybe like the next 30 minutes.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Great to meet you a couple of weeks back. And we alluded to something like this happening. So I'm very grateful it's happening and very excited for what lies ahead.
Tim, maybe just to say, as I've mentioned in the introduction, you moving from, I know that you loved music or still loving music. You still love the church kind of stuff, but you transition into financial services, as I mentioned. Can you maybe just kind of give our listeners a quick synopsis in terms of how that journey happened?
Absolutely. So music is my first love outside of my family and my faith. And it's always been, I guess, maybe a way for me to connect with my family and my faith. And I come from a very musical family as a kid, musical family now with my own wife and my kids. And when I exited high school, studied public relations management, worked in musical instrument retail for a little bit. I was then offered a position as a youth/worship pastor in Johannesburg. So I'm from Cape Town. My wife and I met in high school. We've been together 28 years. And we got married, moved up to Joburg. I was a pastor for several years. And as I started exiting formal church as a paid pastor, I was really connected to a lot of people, obviously in the church community, and a lot of them had small businesses and loved what I was doing in the worship ministry in terms of the graphic design and what was being presented on the data projector back in those days, and they would say to me, "Oh, can't you do our logo? Or can't you reword this? Or can't you help us with this element of our website? We can't get hold of the person who built it. We don't know what to do. We don't like what they created." And I slowly, organically moved into that. And through working the first couple of years with any small business across a wide variety of sectors. I always joke it was from a pizza restaurant to a guy who sold penis pumps. So it was really, everything out in that, people needed help with. And some of those guys were financial planners, and they were needing help with showing up authentically online, which is exactly what I'd been helping these guys do. They had heart for what they did. When you met with them and you sat with them in person, they were just really soul of the earth type of people. They were relationship driven. Even if they were selling weird, wonderful products, they all had a heart to help people with something that was really difficult, something that they struggled with. And obviously financial planners, when I got to know a little bit more about what they actually do, not just what they sell, I resonated with this profession. And in 2016, we then niched into working with financial planners and created a service called Contato. Contato is an Italian word. It just sounds cool. I'm not Italian. It comes from the word contact, in touch, to keep in touch, to keep in contact. And that was really our goal. We found that financial planners, above all else, when it came to digital communication, marketing, branding, that kind of space, needed a way to stay in touch with clients regularly. And slowly that grew, and loved the niche, loved the profession. And 10 years later, still just deepening relationships with people in the industry and the profession.
I mean, that's interesting. I think what you also said to me earlier, and that's so true, that music, there's always a story behind music. And I think that's what you also said, is that's also kind of a nice thread in the story, is that there's a story behind a song. Sometimes we don't like the song, but there's normally a story behind it. And then what you do today is storytelling, and to help advisors to bring their voice to the clients. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even in the early days when I transitioned into being a pastor, and, sitting with what I think many people sit with when they go through a stage of, I've studied, I've worked a little bit in what I studied, and now I seem to be doing something quite different, trying to reconcile those years
Yep.
that have gone before and thinking, well, how did I end up here? This is not what I studied necessarily. And
Yes.
I always understood myself when I was in the church as a spiritual public relations practitioner, connecting a business with their stakeholders. And in many ways, churches are ministry businesses and they have needs. They run as NGOs, they provide services to a community, they have costs, they have,
Mhm.
community needs that they're really good at supporting. And then as I exited it, I focused specifically in the online communication space. We had just had our twins. They were 18 months at the time when I entered what we're doing now, my business. And I was looking for something that I could work in and around the times of two parents. We had no family up in Joburg and had suddenly two kids both at the same time that we weren't expecting to have. We thought one would come and then maybe a few years later, another one. And managing twins with just two people is a full-time job in itself. And so I tried to create something that I could use to support our family whilst being
Yeah.
there for my family, because that to me was important. I didn't want to disappear for 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day. For me, it was important to be around my wife, to be around my kids. And that's
Yes.
how we structured our family ever since. We homeschool
Yeah.
our kids. We run our business from home. Our kids are now 16, and it's a great, great privilege and blessing to be
Mm.
so connected. And
Mm.
music and storytelling has been so key in that. Some of the earliest blogs that I wrote for financial advisors have this little boy with holding a coin on the side, and it was me before we had access to stock photos. I was literally with my phone taking a picture of my
Oh,
son and
is it
trying to
like
get the coin, depth
uh,
of field, and teaching your kids about money. And that's quite cool. A little bit of our family history is embedded in the thousands of blogs we've written and are online today on hundreds of websites. So yeah,
so that's interesting. So my eldest son just got married like 3 weeks ago,
congratulations.
and so I sat with him and his wife, well, my daughter now, my daughter-in-law, and she said, "Listen, can I just talk to them about finance?" And one of the first things I've asked Jonathan is, "What is your first memory of money?" And it was just
Right.
like really interesting what he shared, and I completely forgot about it.
Mm,
At least it was a positive kind of kind of feedback in terms of his first memory of money. So maybe just on that, I
mm,
mean, you mentioned that. What is your first memory of money?
sure. Um, it's weird because I often write blogs about this, but I've never asked myself this question. Um, I think two memories come to mind. The first is I used to earn money through a pocket money book. So my parents would give us money and we'd write it down in
Yeah.
our pocket money book.
Yeah.
And I remember it was on top of the fridge. And to a degree, you'd earn pocket money on a ledger first. They wouldn't give me money every week. And,
Yeah.
it would accrue. And then when I wanted to buy something, you'd go to the pocket money book and say, well, how much have you got available to go and buy that
Mhm.
thing, which was typically a chocolate or a toy. And I guess many lessons were learned through that as well, because often you'd get a pocket money fine. I don't know how your family worked, but in my family, when we got a bit too old for hidings and stuff like that, we'd get a
Oh,
pocket money
okay.
fine
It's like a
if you were
minus
cheeky, if you
5%.
didn't do your chores, if you were fighting with your brother or sister, and your money would go up and down. So there was kind of like learn
Mm,
consequences and learn to save. Um, and then I think the other memory is watching my dad write a check for church,
great.
and
Oh, that's
him explaining
interesting.
to me that this was his tithe.
Hmm.
And I remember trying to remember like, I want to see how much he tithes so I can work out how much my dad earns,
Oh, okay.
And I remember that the tithe being a 10%, and that was
Yeah.
something he was committed to giving every month. And I suppose that I've always had that as part of my money management approach is the importance of
Mhm.
generosity and giving.
It's always interesting for me in a family setup as well, because you come from a certain family and then your wife obviously from a different one.
Mm,
And her first memory of money is obviously very different to yours.
yeah.
And like in personal finance, how the couple kind of work out how they think about money and how they relate to it and how they manage it on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes the long-term goals are pretty easy because it's out there,
Yeah.
yes, it's like we have to save for this house or we have to save for retirement, whatever. But it's more like the day-to-day stuff that becomes complex, isn't it? If you think about
Yeah.
as the kids also become older, now you've got not just you and your spouse, you've got like 3 other people, one the wallet. And how do
Mm.
you make decisions in terms of priorities? That's where
Yeah.
the mess happens, and that's often where the conflict
Yeah.
happens in family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Tim, maybe just in terms of, so you're not a financial advisor, you help financial advisors, as we
Mm.
mentioned. What is one of the biggest kind of challenges that you think financial advisors face in this space of communication? You mentioned connection before, you know,
Mm.
connection. Obviously, at the end of the day, they want to get more clients. They want to
Mm.
implement more
Mm.
products because that's where the money is. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm not gonna get to help me if it's not gonna produce some money at the end of the day.
Mm.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah.
why we would
Yeah.
do it. What is the
Yeah.
in terms of what is the biggest challenge that you think they face?
I don't know if I could speak to one single challenge that would be the biggest. I think it's different for every practice we work with. But I think there are a couple of challenges that we pick up in all practices that we work with. And I have worked with hundreds of practices over the
Right.
last 12, 13 years. And I see this pattern repeated all the time. And one is a problem that is increasingly becoming an issue. And I think that is, and I don't know how to word it properly, and I should be the person who can word it properly, but I
Mhm.
would start by talking about overwhelm. I think a lot of advisors are overwhelmed by all the demands on them. As not just in the communication space, in the compliance space, in succession planning, in so many areas of their business, getting new business, keeping business, transferring business. Each of those has
Mhm.
a whole kettle of fish attached to it that brings challenges with it. And then they met with this digital space that seems endless, boundless, limitless,
Yep.
and that's the overwhelm. The first thing is like, where do I start? What do I do? And that's why we've always had a strategic beginning and saying your online communication begins offline. We have to start with some kind of strategy. And I say to advisors, before you enter the online space, or if you're already in it, audit it and go with strategy, boundaries, and balance. So what is my strategy? And if you don't have a strategy in place, that's where you first kind of tick the box. The second thing is, what are my boundaries now? Because when we go online, and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, inbox zero
Oh yeah.
is, email is just one way that people are going to engage with you. If you start to open up a website, you start to get
Yeah.
active on social media, you start to send out regular emails, there's going to be some more information coming in. There's going to be some more communication coming your way.
Mhm.
And you need boundaries to know, when do I attend to this? How do I attend to this? What becomes urgent? What becomes important? So that's kind
Mm.
of in your operational
Right.
space. And then the balance is, you don't want to now become, there's a phrase going around for the last 2 years or so called finfluencer. And I think a lot of advisors think, well, if I can become a finfluencer, I've got it made. And we actually spoke about this at a recent conference. I forget which one it was. I think it was the FPI conference. And I was on a panel with 2 other great experts in the marketing and communication space. And we were saying it's less about being a finfluencer to everyone and more about being a finfluencer to your people. And
Yeah.
so that's another
Your
way
plan.
to narrow.
Yep.
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
another way to narrow the overwhelm is to say, I don't have to speak to everyone. I don't have
Yep.
to reach more people. I have to reach the right people.
Yep.
And I recently I was tagged in a LinkedIn post that I still need to respond to. Maybe by the time this goes live, I would have responded to the post. But it's basically asking about content and how often should you be sharing content? How often should you be
Mhm.
putting it out? Which again comes back to your communication strategy, your balance, and your
Mhm.
boundaries, right? That helps you have some kind of
Mhm.
framework for that. And for me, it's not just about the content. I look at 3 things. So about 30 years ago, actually 30 years ago, 1996, Bill Gates said, content is king. And that's a phrase that suddenly came to fruition, and it
Yeah.
was the rage around 2010 to 2013, everyone content marketing.
Mhm.
And to a degree, I think a lot of people are still stuck in that space from 10, 12 years ago of we just need to get content out there and
Yeah.
stuff will start happening. And content is no longer king. Conversation is king. Because if our goal is to drive relationships and engagement and connection, we need to be having conversation. Can't just be a
Yeah,
monologue and just a bulk send.
because because we sit with all this AI stuff anyway.
Yeah.
If I want content, I can just go to Claude and get a prompt.
Yeah.
But to have a real conversation and real meaning behind the meaningful discussions,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's human
Absolutely.
driven,
And
and
so when you,
that's your plan. That's the people that you say, okay, this is my people group. This is the people I want to serve as a financial advisor, and I know this group of people, and this is who I want to speak to. And this is the people that I
absolutely.
want to bring over my philosophy, my value, how I can serve them.
And so that's pretty much the other two elements of it. So the one is the content, the other is the community, and the other one is the connection. So it's your who, your what, and your why. Who am I talking to? What am I saying? And why am I
Yeah,
there? Why am I saying it? Why am I showing up? And that
yeah,
then
that,
also starts to bring through the authentic personality of the advisor. And then we're already
mhm.
starting to get into good territory around how do we build this strategy? Because we're using words like authenticity, we're using things like value proposition, and it's focused on things that resonate with that advisor and their ideal people.
Tim, maybe just a little bit back on that story. How much of that is coming from your own family background? And I mean, this view
Mm,
of authenticity and because you also said, it's more about the communication and connecting with people normally, as opposed to help an advisor to be able just to, let's call it, just sell products, because that's not going to work, you
mm,
know.
yeah.
But that connection that you try to build between the advisor and their clients, that connection, where
Mm,
does that come from your own life? Is it
mm,
a lot of just who Tim is, from your family bring up,
mm,
from your cultural background? uh, where does that originate from, and what is like the end goal there, for you in terms of that
mm,
connection?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that is rooted in how I approach life and my relationships with my wife and my children.
Hmm.
And and I think that's also then how we show up authentically. It's to say how, and not to necessarily, because you could say it comes from it because I'm doing it, or it could be it comes from it because I haven't had enough of it and I want to do more of it.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Right. And I think the reason for that then starts to come from where I come from, a faith background, is that there's an original design here. There's an original design for what we were created to do. How do we define our purpose? How do we define how we show up with meaning? Because if we want to start saying, well, we need meaningful conversations, then we need some kind of rubric to say, well, what does that meaningfulness look like? Where do we
Yeah.
derive that meaning? Where do we derive that purpose? And even if you don't look from a faith background, if you look from a science background, we are creatures of relationship.
Hmm.
All the science and the tests that have been done to see early childhood development show that healthier children have healthier connections and relationships and attention paid to them. Wherever there's been disconnection, wherever there's been separation, there is disease, there is disorder, there is disruption, there's unhappiness, there's unhealthiness. And
Mm.
even medically, any doctor will be able to trace back a disease that is manifesting in your body to a lack of something,
Yeah.
whether it's lack of minerals, whether it's lack
Mm.
of healthy endorphins and hormones running through our bodies, whether it's a lack of nutrition, whether it's a lack of rest, whether it's a lack of movement, whatever it is. All these challenges come in through a lack of connection. And so we can look anywhere. You look into nature. If you want to go for a hike, if you want to go for a run,
Mm.
and you just look at how nature engages with itself, how things grow, how things adapt, how things evolve. They do it
Mm.
in partnership with their environment, with what's going on, and that's what I try and kind of engage with when we are creating content, when we are creating strategies for advisors. You're saying, what if we unpack the layers of this blog, what kind of questions could it spark? And that's also
Yeah.
part of our blogging strategy has been not to answer questions, but to get people to ask better questions.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think for me, it's also about the original design. What is
Mm,
how were we as humans created originally? What
yeah.
is our original design? And if we move in that direction, it's normally a good story. But
Mm,
if we normally just we want to follow our own kind of thing, and then it doesn't lead to a good story. So,
mm,
Tim, you and I, we on that call training for Kingdom Advisors on a Monday morning.
yes.
And when you
Mm,
talked about it, my mind just kind of went to this again, to this thing where people in the industry, we normally teach people that we want to plan for retirement up to a
mm,
certain date. It's normally like
mm,
65. But I'm also trying to change the narrative there that, and it also came through in that core training, we always need to be productive.
yeah.
There's nothing good about just working till 65 and then, sorry for the
Mm,
golfers, but go and play golf every
mm,
day because, I'm saying,
yeah.
but because very often what we see from the stats is that if people retire and don't do anything, that
Mm,
connections are missing, their purpose are missing, and they leave, well, they lose the purpose, and the mortality rates for people after retirement
mm, mm,
increases if they don't have the purpose, if there's not productivity. It doesn't mean that you have to earn income from the productivity.
mm,
I think that's
mm,
also just a interesting narrative that we need to kind of just talk through. And as you say, it's not necessarily an answer to the thing. It's just as a community, can we just start talking about this concept about retirement? First, most people won't have
mm,
enough money. And secondly,
mm,
this notion that I'm going to
mm,
sit on my chair in the shade and don't do anything, that's you're
yeah.
going to lose you, and it's back to your connection
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
We were not originally designed not to
Yeah.
be productive.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a topic that we often try and help facilitate, or a conversation we often try and help advisors facilitate, is to remind clients that money is a tool. Money is not an end goal.
Yeah.
And it so quickly gets the lines get blurred and the water gets muddied. And when when we talk about original design, in my mind, I'm thinking original design, we could frame it saying we were never designed to store up wealth. We were designed to steward wealth.
Oh,
And and then,
yeah.
what that looks like, because then that speaks to, so what do I do with it? Not where
Mm,
do I keep it? Where do I hide it? Where do I protect it? It's,
yes.
it's how do I spend this in such a way that it builds up the people around me, that it helps me leave a legacy, an impact. And then we can talk about generational wealth, because how do you do this in such a way that you're
Well,
training your kids for the next
yeah.
thing? We can talk about how do I build into community projects that uplift, because if I build into community around me, there's better resources, there's happier
Yes.
people. And if I've got happier neighbors, it's going to be nicer
Mm,
for me when I go out and greet people.
mm,
And when we create space for how do we engage with debt? How do we not have debt that we need to engage with? How do we create systems of lending money and borrowing money that are more kingdom focused, to use that
mhm.
terminology, and less empire focused? Um,
Yes.
and then how do we create value for those people who are entering an age where they might not feel valuable anymore? So then retirement doesn't just become an issue for the person retiring. It
Yeah.
becomes, well, I'm a 40 or a 50-year-old and there are some 70-year-olds around me. How do I make sure they don't lose their sense of purpose? Because
Oh,
I
very
could be the
good.
person who sweeps in and takes their job. I could be
Yeah.
the person who takes their value and their purpose because I'm
Yeah.
trying to provide for my family, and
Yeah.
because then we start to broaden the responsibility. And
Mm,
the minute we start to share the burden is halved. The
yeah.
burden is lessened. And that's
Yeah.
then how we build community, by overcoming problems together.
That's good. And I think that kind of also triggers something in terms of identity for me. That if I'm
Mm,
secure in terms of who I am, if I know what my identity is, I
yeah.
can run in that direction. And then it kind of frees me up a lot in terms of, as you say, whether I'm hoarding the money or if I'm super generous, because those kind of things don't define who I am. There's a clear
Mm,
sense of identity. But yeah,
mm,
what is, if I would say, Tim, what is your identity? Who is Tim? What would you answer?
mm, So I think there are levels to that.
Okay.
Um, the one that I'm slowly learning to become comfortable with is beloved Son of God.
Hmm.
I I think for 45 years of my life, I've just assumed, I'm a child of God. I'm a child of God, because it's been told to me since Sunday school days. But to actually now understand what that means in terms of authority, in terms of inheritance, in terms of identity, as if I'm a son of God, then who are my brothers and sisters, and what does that mean? Who is Jesus to me?
Mm,
And that then kind of, for me, has brought a lot more depth to it. I think in identity, in terms of the way that I typically show up, is I see myself as a connector of dots. I love to think
mhm,
strategically and creatively, and I love to see where the dots are and how can we connect them. Because if you've got a whole lot of dots, you can do anything with them, right? You can draw any
yeah,
picture,
yeah.
actually.
Mm,
And you can choose which dots to use, which dots not to use, which dots come to
mhm,
the front, which go back, and then it all becomes very three-dimensional. It's no longer
mm,
just a flat diagram. Um, and and that, for me, is about how we weave narratives and how do we bring narratives together and
mm,
understand where one person's story connects with another person's story, and what does that mean, and how do our stories come together to create an even bigger story.
mm. Yeah, I mean, when I ask you the question, I also, I think about Jamie Winship, and when he says he's like a police officer, and I think we
Mm,
briefly talked about it. And I think what he said, he's like what did he say? He's a radical peacemaker.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and so that's his
mm,
identity. The job that he took
mm,
to implement that radical peacemaking initiative is
mm,
a police officer.
mm,
Um,
yeah,
And,
yeah,
for myself as well, it's something new for me as well, but I'm kinda think about myself as being an
mm,
innovator that innovates scalable
mm,
processes for advisors and clients.
mm, mm,
And then
yeah,
I became an actuary. I thought I'm an actuary, but really after like 50 years plus, it's like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay, that's actually,
yeah,
what I was designed to do."
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
interesting if you get the identity right, how that kind of just flows into
mm,
work. And it's
mm,
interesting then how you say when you work with financial advisors, each of them will also have their own unique design, what they need to do. But the common thing
yeah,
is helping clients and making sure that the
mm,
clients look after and steward their money
yeah,
in an appropriate way. But it
yeah,
will be interesting to kind of, I don't know if you've kind of picked
mm,
up different trades or different flavors of that identity with financial
mm.
advisor, or I guess it's also a difficult conversation sometimes because you don't always get to that level of conversation with everyone.
So I've done probably about 60 or 70 custom strategies for financial planners over the last 9 years, 8 years. And every single time we've been able to come up with a unique approach, presentation, hook for that person.
Okay.
I don't think I've ever repeated anything when it comes to a custom strategy. And my process for that is to spend 60 to 90 minutes talking to the person and asking them a few questions. I
Mhm.
worked through Donald Miller's story brand approach. That's a framework that resonated with me. And initially, I didn't have that approach. It was more of just a strategic conversation with the three W's that I focus on: the what, the why, and the who. Um, and and I find that in those conversations, the planner's voice comes out. And there's
Okay.
similarities. Like, often people go, we love to simplify the complex. That might be
Mhm.
a higher level thing. And then we'll drill into, so what does that look like for you? One of the higher level things that Jamie Winship describes as his identity is an untire of knots. And so now you can see,
Oh,
how
that's
does an
right.
untire of knots have a deep heart for working in conflict areas and bringing peace into those spaces,
Yeah.
right? Because he's
Yeah.
seeing there's this knotted identity and this friction that needs to be slowly
Mhm.
loosened and slowly untied, and then can become something valuable, something more precious. But every time we kind of go and create a narrative for a financial advisor. And we've got kind of two levels. We'll either go custom or they can plug into our white labeled solution. And it really just depends on where, like I said, advisors to the most part are overwhelmed. And so some guys are like, Tim, we just need something up. Please just get a presence. And they'll plug into our white labeled solution. Other guys will go, we've had websites before, it's never worked. We've had this kind of strategy, it never worked. We've been on socials, it never worked. What can we do differently? And then we go the custom route. And so either way, the end goal for us is still the same. It's to keep them in touch with their clients, because we know when you keep in touch, you keep your clients. And that is, that is one of the other challenges that financial planners face, is with a growing database, with a growing client network, it's very difficult to keep in touch in a way that keeps clients engaged without feeling transactional. So our goal is to say, we want you to be conversational, not transactional.
Yeah, and I think for me, originally why I kind of like connecting with you, it was that for me that was the link between all the things that you do versus the stuff that we do at Wallstack. Connection with the end client, that connection of bringing the right conversation over, whether it is through wording, communication, or block writing, or through a physical dashboard with numbers. At the end of the day, we want to get the climate conversation to be happening in the right space. So, I mean, anyway, that was just interesting for me. I wanted to ask you the question why, but I think you've answered that one, in terms of why connecting with people for meaningful discussions. I think that is super nice. Tim, I want to land the conversation, but maybe just quickly in terms of your 5 strengths, like your superpowers. Do you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? What are those?
So strategic. I always like to think about, and I think that's often why when I'm involved in community things, I often am more on the leadership side, because I want to know kind of where we're going and what are we going to achieve? Are we measuring this? Have we got to where we wanted to be? Because I think from an authenticity and I think 2 keywords as well that I often like to come back to is authenticity and vulnerability. Those can be very dangerous if you don't have a strategy, because you can just be, there's a proverb that says a wise man holds his tongue. It's to know, authenticity doesn't mean speaking up all the time and just telling your truth to whoever's going to listen. Authenticity means that when you show up, in a way that's going to create space for connection. And that's the vulnerability.
Yes. And value for people doesn't matter who the person is. Okay.
Yeah. And
sorry, I interrupted you.
And no, that's okay. And then connecting the dots and then being able to put that into something that visually and audibly engages people. Part of my job that I love the most, I think, is when I present a visual strategy deck to a client. So we'll go through a strategy session, and then I'll take a few weeks to sit with it and then create something visually as a slide deck that resonates with what I think they're trying to communicate. And 98% of the time, the initial response is, I've always struggled to say this. Thank you. You've helped us communicate this. And there'll be tweaks down the line, and there's some people that I just don't connect with, and for whatever reason, and that doesn't always hit home. But most of the time, it's a very rewarding process to sit with someone, to listen, to try and understand them at a deeper level, and then put it into something that they can become proud of and go, this is who we are. This becomes the cornerstone of our online communication, the cornerstone of our branding. And they are then empowered. So when they sit in client meetings and they're trying to pitch themselves, they're trying to explain the value, they're trying to see what's going on in the early stage of the relationship, they now have this tool that can help them present what they're doing in such a way that they know they can also then deliver the value on. Because it's something they're good at, it's something they love, it's in an area that they show up easily and naturally.
And give the voice to them in terms of who they really are. Tim, thank you. Yeah, this is very good. Just finally, just kind of two fun things. What
Mm.
is your latest prompt, and which one do you normally?
A little like a Gemini prompt, a ChatGPT prompt. Sure,
Mhm.
we use GPT a lot, well, Gemini a lot. I think personally, my latest prompt again comes to my faith. I asked it, where in the Bible do we see Abraham looking up and lifting his eyes, and bring me the scriptures and what might this be telling us? And that just really helped me focus on some elements of scripture that I've never thought about before.
Okay, excellent. And then who's your hero?
I think I have three heroes: my wife, my daughter, and my son. Um,
That's excellent.
they challenge me, they encourage me, and they are. I think I'm biased. I think they're exceptional people. I love the way that they choose to live their lives, and I'm inspired by them.
Thanks, Tim.
Mm.
It reminds me when it was my son's wedding. I say to all his peers, when you see Jonathan again, just ask him how the dying process is going,
Okay.
because marriage has a way of helping us to die to ourselves, and
Yeah.
especially if you have kids. As you
No.
know, that mirror is not blurred; it's pretty
Yeah.
clear.
And quite
And it
harsh
helps.
sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much. I really appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
I I love the connection and speaking with you.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful time. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Cheers.